Good morning. So I want everyone just to look at that wall, please. Thank you. Now look at that wall. Very good. Look at the ceiling. Very good. Look at the floor. Make sure there's no sinkholes. Good. Then look right up here. All right, we're all awake. Wonderful. So it's just such a pleasure to be here because I finally get a chance to get away from looking in front of a camera for 24 hours and meeting the people who are watching some of the videos. And you guys are super interesting. Very interesting people, love it, and there's a lot of great content this weekend. But today we're going to talk about something called prolonged fasting. Some of you saw the video that I did with this guy named Guy, who had stage 4 cancer and did prolonged fasting and got rid of his cancer. That was a 40-day fast. Now, the problem with prolonged fasting is the prolonged part. It takes time and it's really, really hard. How many of you have ever done prolonged fasting? Yeah, it's not easy. So I have a solution. There's going to be something cool that actually can get better results. Yeah, way better results in less time. Would you want to know about that? Okay. So the benefits of fasting. Let's just quickly cover that. I'm going to try to cram as much as I can. You know, the biggest benefit of fasting, especially prolonged, is repair. Your body, you're shutting down the body so it doesn't have to work on digestion, so you can then repair. And repair anything that's broken. So we have the weight loss, of course, insulin sensitivity, longevity, for sure. There's a lot of genes for longevity, which is, it's just bizarre that our bodies have evolved these genetics to live longer when you mimic famine or starvation. It's just wild that happens. Your inflammation marker goes down. The cancer can go down, it can shrink. You have better immune system, autophagy, this recycling of old damaged parts and things like that. Cognitive improvements, mood improvements. The cells start resisting more stress. That's like wild. If someone's on chemo, they can resist more chemo. Longevity. I already mentioned that twice just to make sure it sunk in. And antioxidants. Your body starts making more antioxidants from within. That's wild. The ability to detox, go from phase 1 to phase 2, is improved. More mitochondria. Mitochondrial biogenesis is called. Microbial diversity. There's a lot of cool benefits to this. So I stumbled on this unpublished study in this book, which is on Kindle. It's very expensive. I think it was like $1.99 or something like that. But this book, and I didn't read all the stuff about injecting DNA or whatever, all that part. I looked at this one part of this book that just blew me away with this study. It was an unpublished study. You couldn't get it published, but it was on longevity and a type of fasting. So we had these rats that were fasting, and Lulu was one of the rats, was at the time the oldest living rat. That rat lived to 47 months, which equals 141 years in human life. Now, of course, since then it's been passed, but I was like, wow, there must be something to this fasting, right? I think it was like at 36 months, most of the other rats in the control were dying and getting old and crippled. And so those rats, he became really attached to these rats. They were really cute and they were playing and he just really liked them. So he found one of the rats, unfortunately, it felt really bad. It started growing this tumor in the control. And so he took that rat and put it over here into the fasting group. And it was almost dead. Well, the tumor disappeared and the rat started getting healthy. And so this type of fasting that he did was dry fasting. Dry fasting is you're not drinking any water and you're not eating any food. 1 day of dry fasting equals 3 days of water fasting. There's some really interesting data that I want to share with you on this topic that I want to put on your radar so you can use it as a tool, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of kind of fixed ideas in the area of dehydration. Raise your hand, how many of you heard that dehydration is really dangerous? Yeah. In fact, by the time that you find, you ever hear this concept that by the time you're thirsty, it's too late, you're already dehydrated? You ever hear that? That's not true. Have you ever heard that you can't exist more than 3 days without water? You ever hear that? Not true. There's a lot of people doing like a longer fast, like 10-day fast. You ever hear that if you have to drink more water so you can then feel more full and you can lose more weight? You ever hear that? Not true. You're just going to be more waterlogged. And what about that water just purifies and flushes all the toxins out, right? You ever hear that? Well, that's not true because those toxins are fat soluble. What about you have to keep drinking until your urine is clear? You ever hear that? Yeah, that's a good way to be overhydrated because you're going to develop something called hyponatremia, which is a depletion of sodium, and there's a lot of complications for that. So you typically want to drink when you're thirsty. Okay, so, I think I just had some water come down right here. So just as, you have dehydration, you also have overhydration. And so I don't know where, I don't think Keto Mojo people are in the crowd, but I think they were growing some wine, and they will tell you that to have really good wine, you cannot overwater the plants. So they have to do this procedure where they almost dehydrate them, and these grape plants just start producing all these antioxidants, and the flavor chemicals start coming in there. So even if how many have ever overwatered a plant? Yeah, you can kill it, right? So interesting concept because I think sometimes we overwater our bodies, especially with distilled water, which is the worst in the world. Now, there's I don't know where this came from. You can only live 30 days without food, 3 days without water, 3 hours without shelter. I don't believe that. Now, there was this fascinating research paper that I want to share with you that just blew me away. It was about doing an experiment with zebra finches. These are little birds that have to fly across the desert, and they have to survive. And they had 3 categories of this study. They had the controls, which is they consume food and water, and then another group that only drank water, that's called water fasting, and then the last group, no water, no food, that's called dry fasting, okay? What blew me away was that the group that did the dry fasting, birds, literally produced 6 times more water than the birds that were drinking water, had unlimited water. I'm like, what? 6 times the amount of water? How could that be? And they also burned up between 3 to 6 times more fat than the water group. Interesting, because my wife actually did water fasting for, it's like a week and a half, and she did not lose the weight that she thought. I mean, it was like kind of minimal. That was fascinating. So, so what is up with this fat? Is fat just filled with water? No, it's not. So fat only has 3% water, okay? And muscle has like 50% to 70% water. But fat is not filled with water. What is saturated fat saturated with? Hydrogens. Those hydrogens, when you burn that fat, those hydrogens break off and they combine with the oxygen in the air and they form water and CO2. So that's really what's happening. You're actually creating water to some degree, not completely to what you need, but you're producing a lot of water when you actually do dry fasting. But that will never occur if you're drinking water at the same time. So you're literally sending signals to the body, okay, we have no water. So you need to generate water by burning more fat. So what's interesting about that is that, sometimes people they don't want to do dry fasting because they think it's really dry, but it's actually not completely dry. 1 pound of fat burned will produce 1.1 pound of water, which is roughly about 16 to 17 ounces of water. So let's say you did a dry fast. Each day, if you're burning a pound, you're generating at least 16 ounces of water. I mean, that's pretty wild. And of course, there's a big difference between persistent chronic dehydration, which is dangerous, versus intermittent dry fasting or intermittent mild dehydration. There's a big difference between the two, and especially if you know how to do it right, because it can be dangerous, and I want to share with you how to do it correctly. But you can use it as a tool, and the cool thing about it is that it produces 3 times the results, so you don't have to do it as long. So let's talk about some of the benefits of dry fasting. The first one is it's pretty easy to do, especially if you do it on a gradient, slowly. Like you could do 12 hours. There's several religions that practice certain fasting where they will only eat between, when the sun sets and then the sun rises. So you can fast on average for 12 hours. That is not that hard to do a dry fast for 12 hours, and it's actually not dangerous. You can also do what I think is also easy. How many of you do 1 meal a day? Okay. So let's say you did a 20-hour dry fast where you started drinking water at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you stopped drinking water at 7 o'clock. You didn't restrict your daily water, but you just controlled when you're drinking the water. But you got a 20-hour dry fast, and you do that consistently. I wonder what kind of results that can produce. And of course, I'll get into the rules on how you should do it, but there's all sorts of different ways you can do this. You can start off very small, which I highly recommend, and then you can graduate to a 36-hour dry fast and get comfortable with that, and then go to a 72-hour dry fast. It's actually easier than the water fast. That's what's fascinating about it. So that's one benefit, is it's doable, it's easy, you get a lot of results. What kind of results? Well, one thing, in one study, it showed that your immune molecule called interferon will increase by 5 to 9 times. Now, interferon interferes with viruses, and it shrinks tumors. So it also stimulates the killer T cell, which actually kills tumors and viruses. So you have a fascinating situation where your immune system gets enhanced, autophagy gets super enhanced. See, the difference between water fasting and dry fasting with autophagy is water fasting, you're purifying and cleansing the cell with water. But with dry fasting, it's a thermal reaction. You're getting more heat, you're incinerating toxic waste, and you're really burning stuff out. You get a much deeper cleansing, and you also produce something that you probably don't produce much of, which is what's called metabolic water, or endogenous water. It's your own body's water. It's super pure. It's kind of mysterious because there's a lot of great things about it, but people don't know exactly what it is or what it can do. Also, 3 to 6 times fat loss. You have better stem cells. You have all sorts of wonderful benefits. Now, the question is, if it's true that calorie restriction and fasting generates all these amazing genes for survival, then why wouldn't the body also develop genetics for dehydration or droughts? Well, guess what? A drought usually comes right before a famine, right? Well, I did research on this, and I found that these are just categories of genes. I have hormones as well. There's categories of genes that protect you against drought and dehydration. You have literally over 50 of them. I'm like, wow, why aren't we tapping into this, right? So you have dehydrins. There's also hormones to protect you against salt loss. So when you're doing dry fast, you're not taking any salt, you're not doing any electrolytes, you're not doing anything. So your body goes into this super recycling mode, which is quite fascinating. So here's the question. What does that have to do with the mitochondria? The mitochondria is at the heart of so many different health problems, and you know that. And I think most people know that the mitochondria came from a bacteria, right? How many of you knew that already? Kind of a bacteria merged in our bodies, and it has all the properties of a bacteria, and it does the energy work, and we provide a home, right? What type of bacteria do you think it came from? Between the two, aerobic with air or oxygen, or anaerobic without oxygen? Probably came from an aerobe, right? Aerobic bacteria because it uses oxygen. So those are the two types of bacteria, generally speaking. You have anaerobes and you got aerobes, right? The anaerobes without oxygen started first from the sea, and then it kind of came to the land and morphed into this aerobic bacteria. So that's interesting, but when we look at cancer, what happens with cancer? You get mitochondrial damage, and then you have this rewiring of an ancient metabolic pathway. Interesting, ancient. That does glycolysis, which is burning sugar without oxygen. So if that's true, then cancer is more of a program that came from an anaerobe versus an aerobic bacteria. Anyway, that's my theory. So let's just pretend that cancer is an anaerobe. You have to kind of think of like a fish out of water. What would be the weakness of cancer if cancer did have the properties of an anaerobe? Well, oxygen, right? Let's talk about oxygen. Does oxygen influence cancer? Yes. It can shrink tumors. It can kill cancer. What type of therapies involve oxygen? Hyperbaric? There's a lot of them, as well as exercise, right? You get more oxygen. Does exercise reduce the risk of cancer? Yes. Let's look on the flip side. What would be the opposite of oxygen? Hypoxia. What does a hypoxic environment do to cancer? It causes an aggressive growth of cancer. It starts growing like crazy. What about inflammation? Cancer grows into inflammation and old injuries where there's inflammation. Hypoxia, lack of oxygen, can cause inflammation, and inflammation can cause hypoxia. They're in the same area right there. So that's interesting. So just based on the theory that it's an anaerobe, you can now understand why one would work and why one would make it worse, right? So you have oxygen, then you have the sun. What does the sun have to do with cancer? What about vitamin D production? If you look up the relationship between vitamin D deficiency and high risk of cancer, there's so much data. And then using high doses of vitamin D to shrink tumors, there's a lot of data on that too. So you can't get that without the sun unless you're taking the supplement. There's one of the, I can't remember his name, one of the original researchers in vitamin, I think it's Bruce Hollick, I think. He did research on higher doses of vitamin D, and he found there's a resistance that we have against vitamin D at the receptor level. So he had to really get people to take a lot to create higher levels in their blood. And he started seeing therapeutic benefits of reduction of cancer when you got your blood up to like 100 nanograms per milliliter. So it's like even higher. You can't do anything with cancer when it's really low. So there's a lot of precursor vitamin D deficiencies that lead into cancer. And then in the sun, we also have UV and we have infrared, right? Look at this. There's a very specific type of UV therapy called pulse UV irradiation for cancer. Interesting. UV will kill cancer. And there's also another therapy with infrared to kill cancer called near-infrared photoimmune therapy. So you got to think of a fish out of water, right? What's going to affect the fish? It's like you have sun, oxygen, and gravity. So, because I thought gravity is a stress, like in the ocean, it's just floating around, there's less gravity. So, and then I started researching gravity, and there's a whole bunch of data on hypergravity or having increased gravity in killing cancer. And then you have microgravity, which is a lessening of gravity in space, increases cancer. So I'm like, wow, this is interesting. And then we get into dehydration, of course. You know, a fish is not going to last very long. In fact, dehydration is one of the most potent stresses for an anaerobe. Okay? There's some really important rules that you need to know about. First of all, you don't want to ever do a long dry fast, jumping right in there. You want to start with water fasting, and you want to start with intermittent fasting, and you want to keto adapt before you start. You got to get the body primed for this. And so I like doing water fasting and dry fasting back and forth. And I also always recommend we start with the water fast to kind of get your body prepped. And you want to do it slow and gradual. So you start with you skip your breakfast, then you just do 2 meals, and then you take those 2 meals, you squish them down shorter, then you graduate into OMAD, and then you start doing 48 hours. You know, when I started doing fasting, I had a hard time doing it, and some people have a very difficult time doing fasting. And so that's simply because probably they have a lot of insulin resistance, and they just can't, they're not flexible, they can't quite shift over into fat burning enough. So this is why you have to do it over a period of time, and sometimes it takes months to get used to it and have it work. When you're doing a prolonged fast, it's probably not a good idea to do high intensity interval training because you're trying to get the body to rest. We're not trying to add stress. And probably not combine it with cold immersion therapy or heat therapy because again, we're overdoing it if you're doing long-term fasting. Dry fasting probably will give you the most shutdown of your digestion and your kidneys than anything. And it puts you into this, your immune system, your other cells can now allocate most of their energy to the healing and repair. And that's why it's so important. Because if we take a flip side, the people that are eating so frequently, I mean, the system doesn't ever have a chance to repair. So I think repair is the key thing with fasting. That's what it does. And of course, you don't want to do it like chronically forever because you will die. So you want to kind of break it up. So you do short fast and you go into longer fast. And then walking, I think, would be perfect to do. If you're doing a dry fast, you do want to hydrate before you go into it. And then you don't want to do dry fasting if you have constipation. I'm talking about prolonged dry fasting, not like a short thing, because you can get auto-intoxication. So you want to handle that with whatever you have, do to handle constipation. I also recommend coming off caffeine for 3 days if you're doing a prolonged dry fast because it's going to be easier. You don't want withdrawal symptoms with coffee, going into a dry fast or any fast. So I think a good way to start is to do a 12-hour, which is pretty easy. You probably already do it when you're sleeping. And then you do 20 hours, and then 36, and then get used to that, and then go up to 72, and then see if you want to go further. If you're cycling through a fast, let's say you're doing 20 hours at a time, if you're cycling through, I think you could do that every day. But let's say you're doing a 36-hour fast, and you want to cycle with that. Well, I would recommend when you come off that fast, give it about twice the amount of time to recover before you get into it. Same thing with doing like CrossFit. I think one of the problems with CrossFit, especially if you're doing it over the age of 50, your recovery is, 1 minute is not going to be enough. You've got to give your body a chance to really fully recover before you do the next route. So the other thing is the really key thing with this is refeeding. Refeeding, because if you're doing a 5-day dry fast and you eat too fast, you're not going to do very well. It's kind of dangerous, and also you're not going to get the benefits. A lot of the benefits is how you do the refeeding, and you come into it really gradually. So if you're doing a 5-day or a 6-day or even a 10-day dry fast, you have to spend 3 days really gradually coming off of it, and it's very important. This is why I think it's not good for just the average person to jump in and start doing a long dry fast without understanding how to do it correctly. And I'm just giving you just the tip of the iceberg. You'd have to study on the details. But you'd want to do mainly liquid things, a little bit of liquid, maybe a cup of something every 4 hours. Every 4 hours for the first day. Like bone broth, maybe even diluted juice. You don't want to do a lot of fat because you've already are in so hardcore ketosis. I mean, your ketones are probably just off the charts that you're just going to we're trying to pull you out of this, the ketosis for a little bit, or severe ketosis. Also, when you refeed off of a dry fast, you don't want to consume any salt for at least 2 days. And then the third day, you have just a little bit of salt. Why? Because there's a hormone that's going to be really high. It's called aldosterone when you do a dry fast, because that conserves salt in water. So if that's super high and you just take too much salt, you're going to create a severe drop in aldosterone. Very important. So with water fast, you can do that, but not with dry fast. Very important. Kefir is a really good one to take, even diluted throughout this refeeding, because your microbiome have been literally asleep for however long, and you want to kind of slowly wake them up and feed them. A little bit of cooked vegetables is fine. And so I want to share with you right now, because I'm trying to cram in a tremendous amount of information in a short period of time. So I'm going to go on to the next topic. And if I have time, I'll answer any questions. Shifting gears to another campaign that we're doing right now. You know, how many of you have ever worked with people that have a hard time getting off junk food? Yeah. You ever been in a social situation where it's very obvious to you that they're killing themselves, but if you say anything, they just kind of look at you like, whew. Anyone like that? Yeah. And that's starting to really tick me off. So what I decided to do is I started to create this campaign, The Truth About Ultra-Processed Foods, AKA junk foods. And so I put a tremendous amount of time to try to figure this out, how to get the worst case scenario person off junk food, okay? And I found something fascinating. I found they're not stupid. It's not stupidity, because I know some of you are going, you're just stupid. It's basically their awareness on ingredients is so low, it's like non-existent. They'd never read a label. I read a lot of labels. They don't read labels. So it's a severe lack of awareness and understanding. That's really what stupidity is. So they are kind of stupid because they're not understanding. But if you look at the whole topic of ultra-processed foods, it's a big confusion for them. It's a big unawareness. And if we take a look at that, it really comes down to not understanding the concept or the sentences that make up the concept, and especially the words that make up the sentences that make up this whole ultra-processed food. So what we found is people need to understand the basic words that relate to this topic. So we created this brochure, okay? And we're also building an ultra-processed food kit that we would love for you to also do the same thing that we're doing to get it out there. But I spent a long time to try to figure out how to educate the average consumer, because this is at a level of a 7th grader or maybe a 5th grader material, but that's where you got to go. You can't over their heads, so you got to break it down. So we are going into people's homes, and we're doing a little bit of education, and then what we do is we go in the refrigerator and their pantry, and we're starting to teach them about ultra-processed foods. To make it simple, we isolated 3 simple ingredients that make up 99% of ultra-processed foods. What are those ingredients? Sugar, seed oil. What's the third one? Interesting. If you take carbohydrates and you minus fiber and you minus sugar, what's left? What kind of carb? Starch. This is a big confusion for people. So starch is what is a starch? We're not really talking about potatoes. We're talking about maltodextrin, modified food starch, modified cornstarch. That makes up a tremendous amount of ultra-processed calories. Is that any better than sugar? Well, it's a bunch of sugar molecules connected together, but highly processed. So it's on the glycemic index, it's way higher than glucose. So starch is, it's on the radar, like we're trying to put people on a radar. So what we do is we really break down these words and get people to fully digest those words, and then we show them all the hidden words that they camouflage, right? And this is what we found. It was bizarre. So we start to educate people. We go through the fridge. Okay, is this okay? And they look at they do not look at the supplement facts. Ignore that. I'm going to tell you why right here. You can see, because you can't really tell. Look at, you see these two supplement facts, A and B? If you look at just the total fats, 28 grams on the left, 8 grams on the right. People think fat's bad, so they're going to go, oh yeah, the one on the left is worse. And then we get saturated fats, 4 grams versus 1 gram on the left. Oh, that's bad. And then we get carbohydrates, 17 grams versus 16. Of course, 17 is bad. And then 1 gram of sugar on the left. So obviously the one on the left is bad, but it's avocados. The one on the right is Doritos, which I used to have the bulk in college. Doritos have no sugar. So you might think, oh yeah, they're fine. Boy, they're loaded with starch. Why the heck would anyone want to sell ultra-processed foods? Is it for world hunger? No. If you take a look at, just from a business standpoint, most of ultra-processed foods come from corn, not sweet corn, dent corn, that's field corn, it's inedible, but it's in all their foods. It makes it high fructose corn syrup. Dent corn. How much dent corn can you buy? How much does a metric ton of dent corn cost? $198. That can make a lot of cornflakes. A box of cornflakes is $4. I did the math. The profitability on ultra-processed foods is over 7,000%. Now, if we compare that to meat, what's the profitability of selling grass-fed meat or any meat? At the very most, it's 25%. 25%, okay, 7,000%. It'd be stupid. I'm going to go with the 7,000%, right? You can't make any money on meat. It's like, so this is why they do it. They can shelf life. They make and also subsidies. So you're paying for this product to be produced, and then you buy it, and then you have to pay the doctor to fix the side effects. Is there any food that is lower on the scale of disease, causing disease, than ultra-processed calories? It's like at the bottom, isn't it? Like there's nothing else that is worse for you than the ultra-processed food. So as we're going through the grocery store with an average person on the street, which I have this all in video, I'm going to release it. You know, it took a while for it to sink in, but all of a sudden you can see this shift. It's like, oh my gosh, I've been eating this? I'm like, boy, it took you like an hour to figure that. Yeah. I said, they go like, oh my gosh, I've never even read a label. Oh my gosh, this is poison. And then they had the final realization, which is, ultra-processed food is not even food. I said, thank you. Yes, exactly. It doesn't fit the definition. So that's all in this brochure. So we have a brochure, we have a glossary, we have a little card cutout, we have some additional information, swap foods and things like that. But what we want to do is we want to start a trend. We want to start, we don't want to find a trend, we want to start a trend. But I think if you look at some of the literature out there on junk food, you know what they always include in there as the first thing? A hamburger. Okay, The meat, what's wrong with the meat? Oh, it causes cancer. They kind of lump it right in there. So you're not going to see any hamburgers in here. I'm not going to cover the bun, but the point is that we spent a lot of time to produce this. So does anyone want a copy of this right here? Okay, so when we're done, I have a box back there, and I brought 1,000 brochures, so you can actually have one, check it out. I hope you appreciate it. I put a lot of work into creating that brochure, and a whole team. It seems simple, but it took a while to really kind of, how do I simplify this? And then use a lot of the data that we're using to get people to make changes. So now we're going to go to, I found another house, a family that I can go to that's even worse than the one that I just did. And I want to see how far I can push this thing. But I would love to share, because we're creating an ultra-processed food kit to then share with all of you so you can actually also get your friends and family or whatever, if you're an influencer, to do the same thing, because it's going to be a kind of a joint effort. And so this is where you can download this brochure as well. So write this down, resources, ultra-processed food. And then very soon, give me about 2 weeks. And if I have your email on this right here, I'll send you the kit. It's a digital kit. So you can check it out. But I think one of the problems is you can't just tell people that this food is bad. You have to go through this evolution of teaching them some of the basic key concepts and then having them compare it to the actual definition of food and let them have the realization. Knowledge actually has to be experienced. It has to come from within. It's kind of self-determined. You can't force knowledge on someone. They have to come up with their own knowledge. And so this is why we're kind of calling it the 72-hour upgrade, which is kind of like just do it for 72 hours, okay, and see what happens. It's quite miraculous. I didn't have to do any follow-up. I did a post after a month to talk to them. They're on board, because once they know, they're not going back. So anyway, I wanted to spend a little time with questions, so I hope I ran through this fast enough. I don't even know how much time we have left, but maybe we'll take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all that information. I really need to learn how to fast. And with the hydration, I'm come from the, if you're thirsty, it's too late.
Right.
I'm in construction. I work out in 100-degree weather, and I'm sweating like a whatever. And so how does fasting and not drinking too much water play into a role in an environment like that?
Just the same thing as when you're doing food restriction. You do it intermittently. The same thing with exercise. You're doing intermittently, and then you're letting yourself rest. So most people, they're sweating, they're losing water, and they're drinking water at the same time, but they never do this. Let's stress this dehydration, because I forgot to tell you a really important thing. Thank you for reminding me. Our bodies have at least 50 genes for dehydration. But guess what? Guess how many genes that cancer has to protect against dehydration? 0. And not only that, there's a lot of other diseases, metabolic diseases, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and diabetes, that also are more dependent on that ancient pathway called glycolysis, which is interesting because you can then now use dry fasting as a tool. So you want to just basically restrict. There's something magical that happens when you restrict both food and water, because now you're turning on genes that are ancient, that are okay, survive, survive, survive. So you would, start out with okay, if I'm doing 1 meal a day, I'm going to just not drink any water until 3 o'clock, and then I'll drink till 7, and I'm done. And then you go through the whole cycle. And just see how you feel from that alone. That could be a big change as well. So I'm gonna experiment. I'm gonna do a video on this if I survive. But what I want to do is I'm gonna do intermittent fasting, and I'm gonna speed it up by sweating and going in the sauna and just getting all this water out and just see what happens. I'll let you know if I survive. I'm just going to try all these different wild things and just let you know. Go ahead.
Do you have any books in the works with all the transcripts that you're recording?
You know, I talked to someone yesterday, and I'm like, I need to produce more booklets, keep it simple, and start having all this stuff, so I'm going to get on it. Yeah, I need to do that. But it's hard to, when you do a video a day, by the time you're done with that one video, which is usually 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're like, okay, now I'm going to start the books. So I'm going to work on that.
And what are your views on the sugar allulose?
I think it's good. I think it's a good alternative for sugars. Yeah.
Okay.
How often you recommend doing prolonged fasting, and do you recommend different type of protocol for women and men? Because I know some people do.
Think about this. When you do fasting, you're mimicking starvation. What's going to happen with sex hormones, what's going to happen with reproductive organs, is the signals are, don't reproduce, shut those down right now, let's wait until the famine goes away, so then we can hopefully survive better. This is why you lose your period when you're fasting. This is why testosterone goes down when you're fasting, but when you're done fasting, if you do it right, it comes up higher. Now, one thing I also forgot to tell you is about autophagy. Most of you know what it is. It's a recycling of damaged material, but there is another important, mind-blowing function of autophagy, and that has to do with the recycling of cholesterol and fats to make those more available to your cells, especially the Leydig cell, and especially the cells that make cortisol and other adrenal hormones. So as we age, our cholesterol might go high, but intracellular cholesterol goes down. You have little machines in your cells that make sex hormones like testosterone. Autophagy controls a lot of that. So you can actually use autophagy to kind of fix low testosterone or an adrenal overactive hormone because you're getting more access to cholesterol. Cholesterol is needed for hormones and cell membranes. If we took a cell membrane and we stretched it out, you have a lot of them, and it goes very far. If we just took the cell membranes, the surface area of all your cell membranes in 37 trillion cells is 90 acres of surface area. 25% of that is cholesterol. When you have seed oils, that just messes the whole thing up as well. I won't even get into that. So we need this. So I think you could, it really depends on what you're trying to solve, but you do want to start very, very small and work into it safely. Do water fasting, and then see how your body responds. You don't want to put your body through too much stress. And then, okay, good, do it in 2 weeks later, and start. And then when you get into the dry fasting, you can do just little cycles of 12 hours, and then you go up to 20 hours. See how you feel, and then start pushing it from there. If you have cancer, then you're going to be more aggressive. Because I don't know of any other better thing for cancer than fasting, and especially dry fasting.
All right. Thank you. Kiitos.
I'm not sure what that meant, but
Hello, Dr. Berg.
Hello.
So you mentioned we break down fats and we get water out of it. And does the same process happen in muscle, assuming glycogen stores are depleted?
good question, because in the zebra finch study, they lost no muscle at all. There's apparently this protective mechanism, because you can turn muscle into water as well. And so the data that I found so far, and here's the problem, there's not a lot of research on this, because who's going to want to spend their money on something that you can't make any money on, not even water. In fact, the therapy is very, very cheap. It's actually free. So there's a greater protection against muscle loss on dry fasting than there is on water fasting. That's the data that I found. A lot of the research has been done by the Russians. You could probably read a book on it and find out the exact details.
And do you recommend electrolytes while dry fasting?
No electrolytes, no salt, nothing. Because then what will happen, you're going to force your body to really conserve with various hormones, and things are going to start adapting, and you're just going to get a deeper, better cleanse. And plus, how are you going to take them without water?
Yes, that was going to be my next question, but and exercise and HIIT, you said don't do it while dry fasting. I did it while wet fasting and getting electrolytes, and I did quite well, better than when I was feeding, but
Right.
dry fasting, no.
Well, if you're doing dry fasting and you're doing prolonged dry fasting, you're going to really put your body, it's in repair mode. So now you're going to add too much stress. I think it's enough stress. So I wouldn't combine several other hormetic stresses on top of that if you're doing prolonged dry fasting. Now, you can experiment, let me know if you survive, and then I might want to do it too.
I will do that. I will do
Okay,
that.
good.
Yeah. And refeeding syndrome, I've experienced it, and I broke my 4-day fast with 5,000 calories in a single meal. That wasn't good. And how do I heal from that? Do you have any
Do
knowledge?
another dry fast and then do it slowly.
Yes, that was my instinct as well. Just wanted to be sure, because I don't want to do the same mistake again. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Now, the dry fasting as a tool is, you got to look at it like a tool. Like, I mean, it can handle a lot of different weird stuff, like cysts, abscess stuff, like wild things that you just can't heal with other modalities. That usually will handle it. They're using it for long COVID. They're using it for severe lung infections and inflammation in your lungs. So, I mean, it's something to know about. I'm just trying to put it on your radar. In case you need something like that, you can use it. Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Berg. I am an herbalist as well as a clinical microbiologist, and I have a lot of clients that I have actually done what you did, went through their kitchens and eliminated a lot of things. I had 2 rheumatoid arthritis patients now off all their meds. I've done a lot of work. Well, what I ended up finding out is vitamins are a major trigger for a lot of my people because of the excipients in vitamins, the alternative ingredients. And I had a hard time getting my clientele off their vitamins because they're convinced that these vitamins are going to fill in the gaps of their nutritional needs. And even though we get them on some decent vitamins, some methylated vitamins, if they had excipients like titanium oxides or anything, I found my clients would not do well, absolutely, on them. And I was wondering if you have actually looked into the problem with vitamins, at least especially the things like Centrum and the store-bought ones. I worked for Salk Institute, and we did some research on vitamin uptake with people. And we found that some of these vitamins actually lower antioxidants profiles in people. And it's kind of like now my hopeful journey is to get people off these crappy vitamins.
Take a look at who owns all those vitamin companies that are mainstream. They're food, and food companies. So you're going to get more of the same calcium carbonates, the synthetics and things like that. That would be like a phase 2 I would get into once I get them off all processed foods, because it's, okay, now let's get you off of ultra-processed ingredients for supplements. I have to pay extra to not have maltodextrin in my products. So yeah, that's a whole different story. I don't know if we have, do we have enough
right
time?
quick, doctor. Low T3 after fasting.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to put on medication, and I said no. So I'm coming for the.
It will go down because what's happening is you're causing this mimicking starvation, so your body's conserving energy. Same with the thyroid. So what you'll find is it'll rebound. Once you rebound and you actually refeed, it will come back. Look at the data, long-term studies after fasting with testosterone on athletes, non-athletes. Like you could end up with a much higher. Why? Because you're doing autophagy and you're improving more cholesterol driven into these cells that help the biochemistry of making the sex hormones.
Okay, and last question, doctor. For H. pylori, that my sister-in-law has been having it for many years, tried all antibiotics and fasting, and it's still not working. She lost a lot of weight. She's very sick, and I don't know, like, what can I do to help
Look
her?
at the research between sulforaphane and H. pylori. Sulforaphane. Okay, that's a natural thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, hi, Doc.
Hi.
Can you still get the full benefits of fasting, such as autophagy, if you have to take some sort of medication that you're just not able to get off of? Not diabetes, it's...
I think that's a good question. It really depends, and maybe if you're just drinking a little water and that's it, it's gonna throw things off. I don't know. That's a good question.
Oh,
That's
sorry
a
about
really good question.
Okay.
I don't have all the details on that one, but
Gotcha.
it could be a situation.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks,
Yeah.
Doc. Appreciate it.
Yep.
I'm Dr. Nelson Vasquez, family physician from Florida. You mentioned cancer. You mentioned the story about the 40-day fast someone did. If someone dealing with that situation does a weekly 72-hour, can you do that every week for a while?
You have to work up to it.
Okay.
You start very slow, work up and see how your body's doing, and eventually maybe you could. But I think it could produce a lot
I was
of...
doing 96-hour fasting, water fasting,
Yeah.
doing treatment every
Yeah,
week.
and then you graduate into something a little bit more intense. But I think I'm trying to put this on people's radar to add one more thing that could be what you've been missing. Now, I think I ran out of time 5 minutes ago, so I don't want to take away your break. So I think, do I have to end off right now?
It told me I had one more question. I just have a very fast. Would you please share your thoughts and ideas about fat fasting?
I haven't really looked into that as much, so I really couldn't give you any type of viewpoint yet. And I think one thing, the challenge too with taking opinions for people that haven't evaluated things, sometimes like go to the doctor, what do you think about this? And they'll say, oh, don't do it. Well, they've never looked at it. So I haven't looked at it, so I can't give you an opinion. I think we have to end off. So I want to thank you for sharing. Have a wonderful afternoon and enjoy.